In a crowded alien marketplace, voices shouted and coins clattered. Strange lights flashed above the stage where lives were being sold like objects. Among the noise, two little alien sisters stood together, trembling, holding each other's hands. Their wide eyes searched the crowd, filled with fear. A cruel alien merchant raised his voice. "They will be sold separately," he announced, making the sisters cry out in panic. In the back of the crowd stood a human man. His clothes were worn, his pockets almost empty. He had nothing left in life, nothing but a heart that still cared. When he saw the sisters being pulled apart, something inside him broke. The wealthy aliens laughed, throwing piles of credits. But to everyone's shock, the poor human raised his hand. He dared to make a bid. The crowd gasped. The cruel alien narrowed his eyes. Who was this human, and how could a man with nothing challenge him? The market was alive with strange voices, glowing signs, and the endless sound of bargaining. It was not a place for the weak, yet here stood a human man, alone in the shadows, clutching a small pouch of credits that rattled lightly in his hand. He was tired, his clothes old, his face marked by long struggles. To most, he was invisible, just another poor soul trying to survive. But today was different. Today, his eyes were fixed on the stage in the center of the market. Two little alien sisters stood there, holding on to each other tightly. Their small hands were locked together, their faces pale and frightened. The older one whispered something soft, trying to comfort the younger, but even her voice shook. They had no one to protect them, no family waiting, no one willing to step forward. To the crowd, they were just property to be sold. To the human, they looked like children who had already lost too much. The merchant in charge, a tall alien with a sharp smile, raised his voice above the crowd. "These two will be sold," he declared. The sisters trembled. Then the words that followed made the human's heart sink. "They will be sold separately." Gasps and murmurs filled the market. The sisters cried out softly, clinging to each other, their eyes wide with fear. The thought of being pulled apart was worse than anything. In that moment, the human felt something deep inside him stir. He remembered the pain of loss, the emptiness of being alone. He remembered how it felt to watch helplessly when life took away the people who mattered. His hand tightened on the little pouch. He knew he had almost nothing left, but as he looked at the sisters, he could not stay silent. The merchant began the bidding with a cold smile. Wealthy aliens raised their hands, tossing out numbers as if it were a game. The human's heart beat faster. He counted his credits again and again, knowing they were too few. Still, when the bidding rose for the younger sister, his hand went up. The crowd turned to see him. A murmur ran through them, some laughing, some sneering. A poor human, daring to step into a game for the rich. The merchant raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "A human," he said with mock surprise. "Do you even have the credits, stranger?" The man's voice was steady, though his heart shook. "I do." The bidding continued. Each time a wealthy alien raised a number, the human hesitated, then raised his hand again. His pouch grew lighter, his hope thinner. The sisters looked at him with disbelief, their frightened eyes slowly changing. Was this human really fighting for them? The older sister tugged on the younger's hand. "Don't let go," she whispered, though her eyes stayed on the human. She had never seen one before, but in his face, she saw something the others lacked. He was not looking at them like property. He was looking at them like people. The merchant leaned forward, his smile growing sharper. He clearly wanted to make a fool of the human. With a flick of his hand, he raised the bid himself, doubling it in one move. The crowd gasped. The human froze. His credits were nearly gone. If he lifted his hand again, it would mean risking everything, his last coin, his last chance at survival. But when he looked at the sisters, he saw their tears, their desperate grip on each other's hands, and the thought of them being torn apart burned inside him. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he raised his hand again. The crowd erupted with laughter and disbelief. "He'll starve tomorrow," someone shouted. "What's a poor human doing here?" Another mocked, but the human did not listen. His eyes stayed on the sisters. The merchant's smile faded. He did not like being challenged, especially not by someone who should not matter. He lowered his voice so only the human could hear. "Careful, stranger." "If you keep this up, you'll pay with more than credits." The words were soft but heavy. The human swallowed hard, his body tense. He knew this was no simple trade anymore. This was a test, a dangerous one. Still, when the merchant called the next bid, the human raised his hand once more. The sisters gasped, their eyes shining with a fragile hope. For the first time, the younger one let out a shaky smile. The older squeezed her hand tighter, whispering, "He's not giving up." The market grew restless. No one had expected this poor human to last this long. Some were curious now, leaning forward, watching every move. Others shook their heads, certain he would soon break. But the human stood firm. Though his pouch was nearly empty, his heart told him something his mind could not deny. Some things were worth more than survival. And if he had to give up everything to keep those sisters together, then so be it. The merchant's eyes narrowed, his amusement fading into something colder. He had underestimated this human. Now the crowd was watching, waiting, wondering how far this man would go. The sisters held onto each other, their hope rising with every bid he made. And in that crowded alien market, for the first time in a long time, the poor human felt alive again. The crowd was still buzzing from the human's last bid. Whispers traveled quickly, passing from one alien to another. No one expected him to last even a few rounds. Yet there he was, standing firm with his hand raised. The sisters kept watching him, their wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. They did not know his name, but in that moment, he was the only person standing between them and the world's cruelty. The merchant leaned back with a smile that was no longer playful. It was sharp, stretched thin, as if his patience was wearing away. He raised his hand, calling out another number, higher than before. The wealthy aliens laughed and joined in, making the bid soar higher and higher. They wanted to see how far the human could go before breaking. The human's pouch felt almost weightless in his hand. He counted quickly, knowing he had little left, but every time he thought of lowering his hand. He looked at the sisters again. They were still holding onto each other, still trembling. He could not bear the thought of them being separated. He lifted his hand once more. The crowd gasped. Some laughed loudly, others shook their heads. "This human is foolish," one alien said. "He has nothing. Why is he wasting it here?" The merchant's smile grew colder. "Do you really think you can outbid me, human?" His voice carried across the market, so that everyone could hear. "You are nothing but dust in this place." The human stood taller, though his heart was beating fast. "Maybe I am dust," he said quietly, "but even dust has meaning when it protects what matters." The crowd fell into silence for a moment. No one expected the human to speak. His words were simple, but they carried weight. The sisters looked at each other, their hope growing stronger. The younger one whispered, "He is trying for us. He is not stopping." The merchant laughed, but there was no humor in it. He raised the price again, higher than anyone else dared. His intention was clear. He did not want the sisters. He wanted to crush the human's will. He wanted to show that a poor man could never stand against him. The human's pouch was nearly empty now. He felt the edge of his last coins with his fingers. If he lifted his hand again, it would mean surrendering every credit he had. He would be left with nothing. But then he saw the older sister lean down and whisper something soft to the younger one. The little girl nodded, her eyes filling with tears, but this time they were not only tears of fear. There was something else to hope, fragile but alive. The human closed his eyes for a moment, then raised his hand again. The market erupted with shouts. Some laughed even louder, calling him reckless. Others looked at him in disbelief. A few, hidden in the crowd, even felt something stir in their own hearts. They had never seen such courage from someone with nothing. The merchant's smile finally faded. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human. "You will regret this," he muttered, his voice lower now, more dangerous. But the human said nothing. He kept his gaze steady, not on the merchant, but on the sisters. The bidding slowed. The other wealthy aliens lost interest. This was no longer about money for them. They were only spectators now, watching a strange contest between a poor human and a powerful merchant. The merchant leaned forward. "Very well," he said, his voice smooth but sharp underneath. "Let us see how far your courage goes." He called out another number, higher still. As if daring the human to match it, the human's hand trembled. His pouch was empty now, his credits gone. He could not match the bid with money. For a moment, the market held its breath. Was this the end? Would the sisters be torn apart after all? The older sister squeezed the younger's hand. "Don't lose hope," she whispered. She looked straight at the human, her eyes shining, as if begging him not to give up. And then, slowly, the human raised his hand again. Gasps filled the market. He had no credits left, everyone knew it. So why had he raised his hand? What was he planning? The merchant's smile returned, but it was not the same as before. This time, it was sharp, almost cruel. He had realized something. The human was not fighting with money anymore. He was fighting with something else, something the merchant could not easily control. The crowd leaned in closer, sensing that the bidding was no longer just about coins. Something larger was about to unfold. The human had stepped into a battle that could not be measured in numbers alone. And as the sisters clung to each other, their small hearts pounding, they realized that the stranger who had appeared from the shadows was not going to walk away, not yet. The market grew quiet. The next move would decide everything. The market was unusually quiet after the human lifted his hand with nothing left to spend. Everyone expected him to bow his head, to step back into the shadows where he belonged. Yet he stood there, steady, eyes fixed not on the merchant, not on the crowd, but on the two little sisters still clinging to each other. The merchant leaned closer, studying him with curiosity now rather than amusement. "Strange," he said softly, though his voice carried enough for those nearby to hear. "You have nothing left, human. Why do you keep standing here? Why do you pretend you can win?" The human did not answer right away. His thoughts drifted far away, pulled back into memories he usually tried to forget. He remembered a small home long ago, on a quiet street far from this market. He remembered laughter at a table, the warmth of family gathered close. He remembered two younger faces, his brother and his sister, smiling up at him. They had been everything to him, and he had sworn once that nothing would separate them. But life was unkind. The storms came, the sickness followed, and one by one, they were gone. He was left behind, empty, wandering from place to place. The human's chest tightened as he looked at the two sisters on the stage. The way they held each other, the way they cried at the thought of being torn apart, it was the same pain he had lived through. He knew what it meant to lose family, to wake up alone. And he could not let it happen to them, not while he still breathed. He raised his voice for the first time, quiet but firm. "Because I know what it feels like," he said. The crowd shifted, leaning closer to catch his words. "I know what it means to lose the only people who matter, and I will not watch it happen again." The sisters stared at him, their small hands still locked together. For the first time since they had been dragged onto the stage, hope filled their eyes. The merchant tilted his head. His smile returned, but it was not a friendly one. "Words," he said. "Simple words, but words will not pay." He raised his voice, loud enough for the entire crowd. "If you have no credits left, then you must offer something else. That is how this market works." The crowd began to whisper, excited by the idea. No one knew what the human could possibly give. He had nothing but the clothes on his back and the determination in his eyes. The human's heart pounded. He truly had nothing of value, nothing but himself. And then the thought struck him. Perhaps that was enough. He stepped forward, his voice stronger now. "Then take me," he said. "Take my work, my strength, my life if you must. But let the sisters stay together." A sudden hush fell over the market. The alien crowd was stunned. Who would offer themselves for children who were not even their own? The merchant stared at him, searching for weakness, but the human did not look away. The older sister gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. The younger one clung tighter, whispering, "He is giving everything." For us, the merchant laughed, but there was no true joy in it. A human offering himself? Interesting. Very interesting. But do you truly believe you can pay such a price? This is no simple promise. His voice lowered, like a test wrapped in a warning. What you offer may demand more than you are ready to give. The human nodded. "Then I will give it," he said, his words steady, his eyes clear. The crowd erupted again, some in disbelief, others in admiration. The story of the poor human was spreading quickly through whispers. Many had come only to be entertained, but now they felt something else stirring, something they did not expect to find in a marketplace. Built on trade. The merchant's expression shifted. He had begun the bidding as a game, but now it was turning into something else. He could not simply push the human aside. The eyes of the crowd were upon them both, waiting to see what he would do. The sisters held each other tighter. For the first time since they arrived, they dared to believe they might not be separated. But the air was heavy with uncertainty. No one knew what price the merchant would demand next, or whether the human could truly endure it. The market lights flickered above, the hum of voices rising and falling like a storm about to break. The human stood ready, knowing his next choice would decide everything, not just for him, but for the sisters, who now looked at him as if he were their last hope. The market grew restless as the human's words echoed through the air. He had offered himself, something no one expected. For a long moment, even the noisy crowd held its breath. The sisters stared at him, their small hands never letting go, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. The merchant tapped his fingers on the edge of the stage, his smile curling slowly. "You speak of giving yourself," he said, his voice smooth and heavy, "but words are easy. Any desperate man can throw away promises. What matters is proof." His gaze swept across the crowd, making sure every eye was on him. "If you want to keep the sisters together, then you must prove you are worthy. Not with coins, not with talk, but with yourself." The audience stirred. Whispers spread quickly. Many leaned closer, eager to see what would happen next. It was no longer just a trade. It was turning into a test, something greater than the market itself. The human's chest tightened, but he did not look away. "What proof do you want?" he asked simply. The merchant's smile widened. "Strength," he said. "Endurance, courage. If you truly want to claim them, then you must face the trial." He paused for effect, letting the words sink into the crowd. "A trial that shows you are more than a beggar with an empty pouch." The crowd murmured louder. Some laughed, some cheered. The sisters gripped each other tightly, frightened by the word trial. The human took a slow breath. He had nothing left, but he still had his will. "Then I will face it," he said. His voice was calm, though inside his heart pounded. The merchant nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then listen well, human. The trial is not about fighting. It is about endurance. You will step into the circle, and you will be given tasks to complete, tasks that others before you have failed. If you succeed, the sisters stay together under your claim. If you fail," he let the words hang in the air, letting the crowd imagine the outcome. The sisters trembled. The older one whispered to the younger, "He is doing this for us. He will not give up." But even her voice shook. The human walked toward the marked circle in the center of the marketplace floor. The ground glowed faintly with strange lines drawn long ago, lines meant for contests and wagers. The crowd pressed closer, voices rising in anticipation. The first task was called balance. A tall stack of stones was placed before him, uneven and fragile. The human was told to carry them across the circle without letting them fall. Laughter filled the air. It seemed impossible. He bent down, lifted the stones carefully, and began to walk. Every step shook the pile, but his hands stayed steady. His mind returned to memories of carrying his sister when she was small, careful never to stumble. Slowly, painfully, he reached the other side. The crowd fell silent, then burst into shouts of surprise. The merchant's smile thinned, but he waved his hand. Not enough. The second task, the next challenge, was patience. A heavy weight was placed on the human's shoulders, and he was told to stand without moving. Minutes passed. The crowd grew noisy, waiting for him to fall. Sweat dripped down his face, his knees trembled, but he stayed upright. In his heart, he told himself, "If I fall, they will be taken apart. I cannot fall." When the time was finally called, he remained standing. The crowd erupted again, some cheering, some protesting. The sisters cried quietly, their eyes never leaving him. The merchant's expression darkened. "Still not enough," he said softly. Then one final task. His eyes gleamed as he spoke. "You must walk across the circle blindfolded, guided only by the voices of those you trust." The crowd buzzed. This was crueler than the others. Who could the human trust here, in this market full of strangers? But then, the two little voices rose from the stage. The sisters, trembling but brave, called out together, "Here, we are here. Walk to us." The human's eyes softened as he tied the cloth over them. Darkness covered him, but their voices lit the way. Step by step, he followed the sound of the sisters calling. The crowd held its breath, watching every move. He stumbled, but each time he rose again, guided by their words. Finally, his feet crossed the line. The blindfold came off, and there they were, the sisters, smiling through their tears. The crowd roared with disbelief. No one had expected him to succeed. The merchant's face tightened, but he could not hide the truth. The human had proven himself. The crowd had seen it, and the sisters had become his claim in spirit, if not yet in law. The older sister whispered to the younger. He kept his promise, and for the first time, the little one smiled without fear. The human, exhausted but unbroken, stood tall in the circle. He had nothing left in his hands, but everything he had was in front of him now. The market waited in silence, wondering what the merchant would do next. The night was long, but the human did not sleep. The little alien sisters rested close to him, their small breaths soft and steady. Yet his mind kept turning. He had won them at the auction, yes, but what now? The cruel alien he had outbid would not forget this insult. The man knew shadows were watching him, even when he pretended not to notice. Morning came with a strange quiet. The sisters woke first, their eyes bright but cautious. They had lived too long under fear to truly relax. They asked him simple questions. Why had he helped them? Why had he cared? He gave no grand speeches. He only smiled and said, "Because no one else would." Those words made their eyes fill with something new hope. He took them through the busy markets, making sure they stayed close. Traders whispered as he passed, pointing at him, at the sisters, some with pity, some with scorn, others with curiosity. But the human did not flinch. He bought them food with the little money he had left, watching them eat quickly, as if afraid the meal would vanish. He told them not to worry, that they would never be torn apart again. But as the day stretched on, unease grew. The cruel alien's servants followed at a distance, their eyes sharp and calculating. The human led the sisters into narrow streets, pretending not to notice, but his heart pounded. He could not fight wealth or power with strength. All he had was determination and cleverness. As night approached, he guided the sisters toward the old district, where broken lamps flickered and the noise of the market faded. Few came here anymore. "Stay close," he whispered, and they obeyed. He found an abandoned building, its walls cracked, its roof leaning, but it was shelter. He wrapped the sisters in his coat, promising them warmth. The sisters, tired and heavy-eyed, trusted him completely now. One of them clutched his hand tightly as sleep pulled her under, afraid that if she let go, he too might disappear. He sat awake beside them, listening to every sound outside. From the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes watched. The cruel alien had not forgotten. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Would the poor human's heart be enough to protect the sisters against a world that only respected wealth and power? Or would hope itself be tested in ways he could not yet imagine? The human woke before dawn, his body weary, but his mind sharper than ever. The little sisters were still asleep, their small hands holding onto him as if he were the only safe place left in the universe. He looked at them and knew one thing: he could not fail them, no matter the cost. The city outside was beginning to stir. Strange lights flickered on across the tall buildings, and the air filled with the hum of alien voices. He guided the sisters through quiet alleys, avoiding the main streets. He knew the cruel alien's eyes were everywhere, and soon a move would be made against him. They reached the edge of the marketplace again, but this time the human did not stand as a bidder. He stood as someone ready to change the rules. He lifted the sisters onto a small platform, the same kind where they had once stood as frightened prizes. The crowd turned, surprised to see him there. Some mocked, others whispered, but he did not let their words touch him. He raised his voice, clear and steady, so all could hear. These sisters do not need to be owned. They need to be free, and freedom is not something that can be bought. A ripple of shock moved through the market. No one spoke that way here. To say such words was to challenge everything the merchants believed. The cruel alien stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger, But the people were no longer silent. Murmurs began, spreading like fire. Some looked at the sisters' small faces, saw their fear, their innocence, and their trust in the human. Others looked at their own lives and wondered what it meant to live in a world where even children were divided for profit. The sisters, holding tightly to the human's hands, whispered softly, "Don't leave us." He bent down and promised them quietly, "Never." What happened next was not loud, not sudden. It was a shift. One merchant lowered his hand. Another stepped back. And then, as if the weight of the market had turned, the crowd no longer looked at the cruel alien with respect, but with doubt. For the first time, his power was questioned. The human did not claim victory for himself. He only walked forward with the sisters, guiding them away. While the whispers grew stronger behind him, he was still poor. He still had nothing. But he had shown something no wealth could buy: the courage to stand and the heart to protect. That night, in the quiet of the old district, the sisters lay beside him, no longer trembling, no longer afraid. They whispered their dreams to him, dreams of growing up together, dreams of never being torn apart again. He listened, smiling, his own heart lighter than it had been in years. The cruel alien would not forget. The world would not change overnight, but the seed had been planted. The human had proved that even in a place ruled by wealth and cruelty, kindness could still turn heads and soften hearts. And for the sisters, that was enough. They were no longer alone. They were together, safe in the hands of someone who chose them, not because of profit, but because of love.